start with what I got here. Commissioner Lance,
Present.
and then I'll just go down to what I have in front of me. Amy Marciano Ratliff,
Present.
Alana White,
Present.
Joe Soborowski,
Present.
Nate Darlington,
Present.
T.R. Shaw,
Present.
and I believe Bester Davis.
Present.
All right, and I believe that it's everybody from our end.
Okay, great. Everyone had an opportunity to review the agenda. Are there any notes or additions or subtractions from the agenda? Hearing none. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any comments? All in favor of the agenda, say aye.
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 Opposed? Wonderful. The agenda's been approved. All right, looking at the next item on the agenda is the meeting minutes. If I get a motion to approve the meeting minutes for September 26th, 2023.
Amy will make the motion.
Thank you, Amy. Can I get a second?
Second.
Sounds like Vester was seconding it.
Yep.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any nay? No nays. Okay, September 26th meeting minutes have been approved. Can I get a motion to approve the December 5th, 2023 meeting minutes?
So moved.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? Hearing none. Can I get all those in favor say aye?
Aye.
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 Any nays? Hearing none. Been approved. All right, any old business? Anyone have anything, talk about anything old? All right, hearing none. New business. Looks like we have a update from the staff.
Yeah, so what I'll do, good afternoon, everybody. I will introduce Stephanie Ward here in a second. She is our consultant from Mead and Hunt. She is the one of the employees responsible for the airport layout plan update. So the update that I've been talking about with the board for several months now. So Stephanie is with us today. I'll probably stop sharing my screen, and you've probably heard enough from me on this. So I'll hand it over to Stephanie. She's got some information for us to hear today. That'll be the majority of the presentation today. Will be about the ALP and the ALP update. We can obviously ask questions to me or Stephanie if you'd like to, but I'll kick it over to Stephanie. Go ahead.
Great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. As Phil mentioned, my name is Stephanie Ward. I'm with Mead and Hunt. I am the project manager for the airport layout plan update. Can you guys all see my screen okay? Sorry, I'm working from a remote location that bandwidth was questionable this morning, so that's why I'm not on camera. Wanted to give you a brief update. As you've been hearing about for the past 12 months, I see several names on the call that are familiar that we met with as a part of our stakeholder outreach already. So appreciate you guys talking with us. Wanted to give you a brief update of where we're at with the airport layout plan. I myself have been involved with the airport for over 20 years now. And so have really watched a number of things come to life on the airport, a lot of growth, a lot of development, which is always exciting to see. With the project, what I want to do is kind of explain first what an airport layout plan is, and I'll use the term or the acronym ALP as we move through, in case some of you aren't familiar with it. Talk a little bit about what we're doing, some of our initial infrastructure review, and then just kind of where we're headed next. Wanted to give you an even playing field because we will be using you as a sounding board as we move through the project. And so probably be planning to give you some briefings, at least 3 or 4 here as the project moves forward. The slide you can see here is just an update of who our project team is. As I mentioned, we're the project manager and doing the bulk of the analysis. We also have NV5 Geospatial on our team. They are providing updated aerial photogrammetry, topographic mapping, and the obstruction survey. So we're going to have a lot of brand new information that we're all looking forward to having, because a lot of the base mapping that we've been working from is well over 20 years old. So you can tell that there's been a lot of development that's happened. We do a survey on individual projects, but haven't had a full-blown airport review in quite some time. The other element that'll be key from that will be that obstruction survey. I know that, prior to Phil coming on board, I know that Larry and Miles have both shared with you that we do have some obstruction issues to be concerned about in the 6 runway approaches. So that'll be critical information that we'll be getting on specific location and amount of penetration for obstructions that will be then leading us to some obstruction removal projects in the near future. We also have Commonwealth Associates. They're doing some title work search for us, which is required for us to update your Exhibit A property map. And then Row Engineering will be providing the boundary survey and some of the parcel review to support that Exhibit A mapping. So those are all critical, because as we move forward with development on the airport, FAA is more in tune than ever into making sure that development that happens is happening according to FAA policy. And their ability to review and comment is based very largely on how the property was acquired, if it was acquired with federal funding or not, and if it's been previously shown on a document or not. So that's why we're putting that care and attention into reviewing that information as we move forward. So kind of what is an airport layout plan? Well, an ALP is basically a drawing set of how the airport looks today and how we want it to look into the future. So it's a set of documents. Usually I'm anticipating we're going to have around 20 plus sheets to make up Battle Creeks that'll illustrate that infrastructure needs. The reasons it's very key to have one that's up to date is any project that you want to obtain federal funding for has to be shown on this airport layout plan. So it's very important that we illustrate where different development is going to go, what it's going to be evaluated for, and why it's there, so that we can keep those federal dollars for it coming in. And I'll show you in just a moment, there's also some key analyses that FAA is asking for as a part of the process. For all intents and purposes, we're doing, I'm going to call it a mini master plan. A lot of the analysis that you see here in what's taking place are things that we would normally do within a master plan that leads to ultimately an airport layout plan. The only thing that you're not getting here is the actual written document in terms of a physical master plan. And that's because MDOT and the Detroit Airports District Office are not big fans of full-blown master planning at general aviation airports. So we can do a lot of the analysis and it just doesn't manifest itself into a full-blown published document, but we'll have plenty of working papers that Phil and Miles will have at their disposal to use as we move forward. So as you can see here, there's a number of steps that we go through: stakeholder outreach, data collection, and forecasting. You'll see in a moment we're heavy into all of those elements right now. We'll be taking all that information and cross-referencing it back to facility requirements, meaning what does FAA say you are eligible for and need compared to what we're hearing from your users in your fleet mix. We'll also be looking at an environmental overview. We'll be looking at where are wetlands on the airport, are there any historical facilities, biological concerns, and we'll be evaluating that as it relates to our proposed development. We'll take all that information and we'll develop alternatives for development, and I'll mention some of those in just a moment. Ultimately, it will result in recommendations that we will manifest on that airport layout plan so that we can seek FAA funding for it, develop the ALP and the Exhibit A property plan. So all those first 7 steps lead into the final actual development of the ALP drawing set itself. You can see, as I mentioned, there's a number of sheets that make up an ALP. We look at data, we look at what's the existing and future scenarios of the airport. Those get manifested into their own sheets. We'll look at a terminal area plan, and that's where we can do a bigger blow up, for example, of maybe the Duncan Waco area as compared to the Western area. We'll do blow ups that can get into more detail of those areas. And then we'll have the approach sheets and the Part 77 sheets. Those will address those obstructions that I mentioned and how do we deal with those. And then last but not least is the Exhibit A property man, which shows how all of your land holdings have come together over the years. So out of those different pieces and parts, we're heavily involved in a number of those right now. While that graphic would have led you to believe that it's a linear process, it really isn't. It's very interrelated. So the data collection, we started with our tenant interviews back in January. Those were very productive. We appreciated the time that the individuals spent with us talking to us about their plans for development and how that is impacted or would be impacted by development at the airport. So we're wrapping up that phase right now, and the aerial photography and obstruction information, those are underway as well. The forecast, we've developed some draft forecasts of operations, and that looks at both based aircraft as well as overall operations. We'll be providing that information here, hopefully within the next week or two, to Phil and Miles to take a look at, to vet that, and then we'll need to get that off to MDOT and FAA. That's one of the few things that the FAA actually has to bless. A lot of the development that's shown in an airport layout plan can be at the airport's discretion. The FAA will give us what they call a conditional approval, where they'll say generally it looks good on paper, but as each individual project comes to light, then they'll get a chance to comment on it. So that's why they really only approve the forecast. So we'll be developing those here very shortly, or I should say getting them in for review. As I mentioned, the facility requirements, this is really one of the key parts of the study, and that, it's no surprise to any of you on the call that there's a lot of infrastructure at Battle Creek. And unfortunately, there's a lot of it that doesn't fit the FAA's current opinion of what an airport needs to be. And so we'll be balancing that with what they call critical aircraft. So we'll be looking at what are the aircraft that are actually utilizing Battle Creek on a day-to-day basis. What do those figures look like? And coming back with what does the FAA say we should have to facilitate that level of use compared to what we actually have on the field. So there's a number of elements that we'll be looking at there. There's also a number of geometric issues that we'll be looking at. Many of you may be familiar with some of the different geometry that we have around the airfield. As an example, up there to the northeast corner, where taxiway Alpha ties into runway 23. Coming out of the western area, we have a non-90-degree intersection. That's something that is on FAA's hit list, if you will, of things that they want to have corrected. We've got a number of intersections like that throughout the airfield. We'll be looking at ways to clean up that geometry and be making some of those recommendations as a part of the ALP update. We'll also be looking at runway length needs. One of the things that FAA is very attuned to right now is what does an airport need to meet the current use? And if you're overbuilt, is their term, how do we correct some of that, or identify what would then be eligible for federal funding? We'll also be taking a look at aeronautical and non-aeronautical development areas. There's a lot of property that makes up the Battle Creek Executive Airport. Unfortunately, there's an awful lot of it that's an interior to the airport where it's hard to get at. And so one of the things we'll be looking at is what can we do to open some of those areas up and identify those for development. And then last but not least, I mentioned the obstruction identification and its mitigation. We'll be developing a obstacle action plan that will show how do we intend to address whatever's identified as being obstructions in any of the 6 runway approaches.
So this, can I interrupt that?
Sure,
those
please.
points about the FAA, like length of runway and stuff. I think that gives certain people some heartburn. Maybe that
Sure.
It's not a foregone conclusion, right? You're just kind of mapping out what the FAA wants to see. I mean, the community still has some input.
Oh, absolutely, Joe. Great question. What we'll be mapping out will be, in FAA's world, let's use that term, shall we? In FAA's world, what do they feel is appropriate and required to meet your current needs based upon their base data? We'll then be bringing that back, and that's where that alternative discussion is. We'll be bringing that back to this group as well as the airport themselves and the city to say, okay, here's what, on FAA's perspective, what they believe the airport needs. Here's what's actually there. What do we want to do? Because we're anticipating there'll be something in between. As you know, with the last runway rehabilitation that we did of 5 left, 2, 3 right, FAA came to the table with dollars to rehabilitate 7,000 feet, and the state and City of Battle Creek came to the table to bring up the remaining 3. not to get to the end of the story first, but we anticipate something similar will probably come out of this planning exercise, that, there's going to be a justification according to FAA's criteria of a certain length. That
Gotcha.
doesn't mean that we're going to go out tomorrow and, move the runway ends. But I think it's going to put everybody on notice that here's the reality of the situation of where FAA believes we are. And that will be a issue that would then have to be dealt with the next time we try to do any type of project with the runway.
Understood. Thank you.
Nope, good question. And we'll be evaluating that same thing across every one of the 3 runways, as well as a number of the taxiways as well. They're looking at, their term is right sizing. So they're looking at every facility. So it's not just, Battle Creek isn't in their crosshairs. Every airport right now is going through these sorts of evaluations to determine what FAA considers to be justified. So moving forward over the next couple months, what we're going to be doing, as I mentioned, we'll be submitting the forecast to both the airport, MDOT, and the FAA for review and approval. We're really going to start now getting into those facility requirements. We had great conversation, as I mentioned, with the data collection, which was very helpful from Duncan and Waco and the Guard, Western, and also the air traffic control tower, which was great as well, talking about how the existing facility is used. So we know what's happening in the field, and now we can compare that to what FAA technical requirements are and see where we align. We'll continue and complete the environmental overview and begin developing those alternatives that would address those different issues. So that's going to look at critical aircraft, it's going to look at runway lengths, it's going to look at runway geometry, and it'll start looking at what are our opportunities for future growth and development. So I anticipate at your next meeting, we'll have another update for you, and probably want a little bit more of your time to share some of these pieces and parts in more detail of how are they aligning with what we saw from what FAA wants you to have compared to what's actually on the ground at Battle Creek, and be looking for some feedback on that. So with that, that's kind of the 30,000 foot level. Phil asked me to keep it generally brief because, we don't have a lot of, gory details, if you will, at this point to share with you. We're just collecting that information. It's really once we start to get into the meat of it that we'll have more information to share and I guess decisions to make, if you will. Any
The
questions?
other question I have, Stephanie, and I know it's
Sure.
pretty basic. Do you want to just send me that slide and then we can distribute it to everybody?
Absolutely. Happy to do that.
Okay.
Thanks, Stephanie. Anyone have any additional questions for her? We look forward to the gory details.
Okay. Thanks.
Put the agenda back up for us here. Yeah, and so in terms of the staff updates, and thank you, Stephanie, for that. We'll continue to work with Mead and Hunt, work with all the tenants. Like she said, everyone's been great so far. We're still in the initial. Do you think, Stephanie? I guess one question I would have, if you could look at it from a 100% being complete, 0% being not started, about what percentage do you think we are at this point? Just again, ballpark.
We're probably in the 15 to 20, the alternatives analysis, facility requirements, that's really the heavy lifting in terms of the analysis. And then the real heavy lift is putting all that then onto the airport layout plan, drawing plan. So probably 15 to 20% at this point.
All right, great. Yeah. So, and again, still like we anticipated, still over a year to go with this ALP update. It's a long process. I'm looking forward to each step as we go along. We have monthly calls with Stephanie and her coworkers just to go over steps that they've taken and data that's been collected. So we'll continue to keep the advisory board up to date on anything new. And I will definitely, Stephanie will continue to come as these updates become more juicy. Is the word that I'll use. There'll be more meat in it, and I think it'll be fun to see the group get some of that information, talk about that information, see what the city would like the airport to hopefully look like here in the future, and then how we can pitch that to, again, the state through MDOT and then through ultimately to the FAA to get that signed off and official so that we can move forward with our ALP. Because again, like Stephanie said, this document is what we're going to be using to go forward to get federal funding. So they're always going to ask the question, is it listed on your ALP? So if we want it to be something that the FAA funds or we get federal dollars for, we get grants for, we get funding for outside of city dollars, this is the document that we'll be using. So it's very important. Thank you, Stephanie. Again, that was a great presentation. We're looking forward to more information that becomes available. But it's really, again, the staff update for today. Does anyone have any questions for me though? And then if not, I can kick it over to the Centennial Committee.
Hey, Phil, could I just ask Stephanie one more question? So Stephanie, when the FAA looks at this and they're making determinations about what they would say we need, which of course dictates what funding they'll make available, I'm going to assume they're just going to use past trends, right? They're going to look at what's happening over the last 5 years or whatever the case may be. But when we think about planning for future growth, how do they reconcile that? If we think, yeah, okay, we've got this many operations today and the trend says it's maybe flat or, you know, we're only projecting a certain amount of growth, but we want to build out the west side or something along those lines that we anticipate would have this kind of impact. How does that get reconciled in this process?
That's a great question, Ted. If possible, I would love to scroll back about 15 years because then we were in a world where we could build it and they will come. We don't live in that world anymore with the FAA, unfortunately. They really are about the here and now. So it will be a, I won't sugarcoat it. It's going to be a challenge. Part of our reason for doing the outreach that we did with the initial stakeholders and continued outreach that we'll do with this group as well as others as we move forward is to figure out what that vision is. If we can put together enough documentation and support for it, FAA is willing to consider it, but it has to be a definite, solid, we couldn't walk in right now at this moment and say, hey, we're planning for the west side to support X, Y, or Z, and therefore we need to build it. They wouldn't come to the table with that kind of a conversation at the moment. If we walked in and said, well, we've got letters of support, we've got a committed user who we're actively talking with, here's what they're bringing to the table, it becomes more viable. I won't guarantee, completely viable, but becomes more so. A great example we just went through that maybe gives you a little interest is, up in Big Rapids recently, we were trying to extend their runway. They have 4,300 feet right now. We were trying to get them to 5,000 feet. The Bureau of Aeronautics, because they're a general aviation airport, much like Meadow Creek, said, well, just because you've got a user that says they need it, we're going to tell you that we need a copy of a bill of sale. We need to see that they've ordered this aircraft that's going to need that runway length, which we thought was a little extreme. But the airport or the aircraft owner said, okay, fine, I'll put my money where my mouth is. Well, he did. And then unfortunately, because the MDOT didn't come to the table and neither did FAA, that aircraft is now relocated to Traverse City, took its fuel sales, its hangar rentals, and everything else with it. So very unfortunate circumstance where somebody said, well, prove it, they did, and then FAA still didn't come to the table. So those are the types of things that we want to certainly avoid. We don't want to spend City of Battle Creek's money unwisely, but we also know what we're up against. So the Mean Hunt team has made plenty of arguments across the country on different projects, and so that's really where we want to bring you good alternatives to the table to say, well, here's how we argue for or against. There's lots of ways that these things can be presented as we move forward, and so we're going to want to try to bring you a full complement of information to consider that moves the airport forward. You're getting an interesting opportunity here to update this, and we're looking out over the next 20-40 years. An ALP is supposed to be updated every 5, and you'll see that it's been 20 plus since the last time we did this, so it's been a while. So to your point, we're certainly looking for it, and we'll do the best to document that we can and show it as we can. But then when it actually gets into, I'll call it go time, when we're actually then asking for the funds, then we'll have to revisit it.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions from anyone? Okay. I'll have you, are you able to stick around for a little bit longer, Stephanie?
Yep, I can hang around if you need me. Yep, happy to.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll kick it over to you, TR, and then if anybody thinks of anything at the end, then we'll go over to Stephanie. But go ahead, TR.
Good. Well, things are starting to pick up with Centennial. We got some events planned. Our first event was actually this weekend. We were at the Arts Center. We had about 30 students that did aviation art, and we had about 100 and some people there yesterday. And Penny can tell you a little bit more about that. But I want to thank everybody that contributed to the gifts that we did to the kids. And that exhibit is on for the rest of the month at the Arts Center. Really good stuff up there. Some really a lot of good engagement with kids and aviation. We also have an aviation exhibit on right now at the Battle Creek Regional History Museum. They've got a lot of models, artifacts, old posters and things from the past that they dug up. So throughout now through the summer, there's going to be the aviation exhibit going on at the Regional History Museum. And also there we've planned a couple of events. We've got some lectures coming up this summer. Haven't scheduled them yet, but one of them is going to be General Wilson is going to talk about the A-10. And we also have an expert coming in on aviation history in Michigan. So those will be some presentations going on there. May 18th is the Brass Band of Battle Creek concert. They're doing somewhat of a tribute to aviation. It's a flight themed concert. They're doing some aviation music. Not sure exactly what they're going to play, but it'll be a lot of publicity for what we're doing, some awareness of the airport and what's going on. So that'll be a good event. And then we're moving forward for the September event at the Western College of Aviation. We're going to have an open house the morning of September 21st. Probably a pancake breakfast, a fly-in, and hopefully some static displays. And some of the attendants will be open for tours. And then later in the day, we're going to have the dedication ceremony, hopefully a guest speaker, and kind of a community event for that. So that's rolling along. We're still working on a book. We've got a lot of input for a book. We got photos, we got stories, we got a lot. We're getting it together. The big thing with that is just the cost of putting out the book. We're still working on that and doing some fundraising. So hopefully we're going to start a fundraising campaign here to do some sponsorship and get some of that. So that's rolling along. But like everything else in Battle Creek, raising money is always a challenge. As far as community engagement goes, I've done at least a dozen presentations to service clubs and organizations. They've been gone over extremely well. People are just amazed at what the airport is all about. And it really, there's I want to say a great deal of ignorance on what we have here. And they're really just kind of blown away by it. And they're all very positive. If anybody wants to have a presentation somewhere, let me know. It's about 90% history and 10% about what's going on now. But people leave there really well informed about what we have here. So that's been going real well. And Penny, you want to say anything about the event yesterday?
Just that the elementary students that showed up did a lovely job, and that the next reception that the committee members can come to is on the 24th from 2 to 4 p.m.
Okay. Oh, that's 24th at the
Art Center.
At the Art Center. Okay.
That's the reception for the middle and high school students. Yesterday they had the elementary students and families in, and they raffled off 30 art classes for students, and they still had obviously more tickets in their raffle. And then out of those 30 students, we selected one grand prize winner to win the box of goodies from every one of our tenants here on the field.
Yep, thanks for your effort on that. That was a great event. So other than that, if you have any questions, just let me know. I'd be happy to get out and talk to anybody about this. It's just part of the reason we're doing this to support the airport, to build the awareness of the airport, and keep it rolling. So thanks for all your support and attention.
Thanks, TR. Last item on agenda is there a preference toward the June 4th or June 11th meeting?
And those are both on a Tuesday.
June 4th for me.
That's preferable.
Works for me.
All right, set it for June 4th.
All right, we'll set it up for June 4th.
Okay. Is there any folks in the public comment?
We have no one in the waiting room, Commissioner Lance.
Wonderful. Okay. Is there anything by any other members? Any other comments?
I'll just throw this out to the group to be looking for an invite. You know, we completed our new hangar at Duncan, and we're looking at scheduling a spring open house. So as soon as I get those dates and times established, I'll make sure that you guys are the first to know and invite you guys out here personally to see the new hangar. So, and if you can't make it during that time, feel free to reach out to me at any point as well. I'll be happy to take you through there.
Thanks, Nate. Any other comments? All right. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate the presentation, and we'll see you in a few months.
Thank you.